Hello, everybody. So I'm going to now have a look at something I've already done a little bit, which is looking at some appeals in the Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp case, or Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. And I'm going to look to start with, and we'll see if I am able to share my screen. I don't think I can with my camera. No, I don't know how to share my screen on this. But anyway, I'm going to look at the Johnny Depp's appeal. And I did look before now. I'm not looking at this as a lawyer. I'm looking at this as an analyst because I'm not a lawyer. I'm an analyst. I should say this several times. So Johnny Depp's one is 44 pages long. Right now, out of those 44 pages, the first 8 pages are just in the table of contents. So it's essentially 36 or possibly less if I get to the end. Now, when we look at this, essentially, we're really on to page, what, about 12? There you go. Page 12 is when they start the actual case. And there's three. So the first one is that Adam Waldman is an independent contractor. The second one is that they, what was it? The second one is that they um, should have, yeah, told the jury that he's an independent contractor, and the third one is that they should have had the unredacted statements in there. So my view on this, so realistically, the idea that he was an independent contractor is a reasonable one. It's not an absolute certainty to work, and I've certainly, from my perspective, I have looked at other people and what they've commented on, and that's sort of where I find it. So I don't do the legal arguments, but there you go. Number one, the trial court erred in denying Mr. Depp's motion for summary judgment. Anyway, whatever. So, a discussion, Mr. Waldman is an independent contractor. So I don't make the decision as to what's legally true or not. I just look at what other people have said, and then I go through it, I sort of weigh it up. And the vast majority of people are saying that he is an independent contractor. And the danger that I'm hearing is that if they allow it to be a situation where a lawyer can be sued, or sorry, that a person can be sued for what their lawyer says, then you get into that dangerous situation where people won't want to have lawyers. And as a precedent, this is dangerous. So they need to have, at a bare minimum, that they separate this. So they can either say, all right, well, this is a situation which is unique and it doesn't apply generally. So if they do that, people can still have lawyers. Otherwise, it'll be difficult for people to hire lawyers because they'll be like, oh, but what if the lawyer goes off and speaks on my behalf or speaks without my permission and then I'm sued for it and found guilty of defamation? So that's a very difficult thing. And that's the first major point that is very difficult. But there is some credibility to doing that as long as they make sure that this is not a general decision that's going to apply to everybody. And I've heard that there are apparently already cases that are going out there that are relying on this and then saying, well, the lawyer said this, therefore you're guilty of defamation because of what your lawyer said when they were representing you. And realistically, I think that you have to say that Adam Waldman was saying a legal argument. That wasn't necessarily absolutely true because legal arguments aren't always necessarily true. You might say, oh, he shouldn't be commenting to newspapers or magazines, particularly something like a tabloid newspaper like the Daily Mail. But the point is that he did that. America's a little bit different to here in Australia. And, it wasn't Johnny Depp's decision for him to say that. Johnny Depp didn't say, oh, say this. So that's the first point. The first point is that sets a dangerous precedent. Now, does the appeals court care that they're setting a dangerous precedent that might affect people's ability to hire lawyers? They probably do, but that won't decide whether or not they agree with this. What they end up doing is that they will say, well, is he an independent contractor? Could he be sued? And that's essentially what they're saying. Can he be sued for this? He can be, but it's a very difficult burden. Now, have they already gone through that? I think they have to some extent, but the jury weren't really informed about that. So there were some messages that they could have informed the jury about, and they didn't. And I think that the fact is that judges are former lawyers, and they progress through the ranks. They don't always become judges. Most lawyers only ever stay lawyers, but some of them, if they're very good lawyers and they get recommended, they become judges. Maybe they become magistrates first. Court of Appeals judges are quite high up as far as judges are concerned, because that's higher than, for example, Judge Ascarides, the one that was trialing the original case. So these Court of Appeals judges are higher level than she is. So they've already gone through her level, and then they've become Court of Appeals judges afterwards, or not necessarily, but it is a high rank. It's this is these are high level people, and these used to be lawyers, and so they're always conscious of what might affect and impact the people who are still at the lower rungs, who are still lawyers. And Adam Waldman is just an ordinary lawyer. Now, he might be a very good lawyer, he might be a high price lawyer, but he's still just a lawyer. He's below the judges. So the judges will have a kind of a responsibility to look out for people like him. And they wouldn't be looking out for purely him, but more at judges, lawyers as a whole. So it'd be very important for them to either overturn this because the precedent, or else make it very clear that this is not something that applies for every lawyer in every situation. So they need to have that clarity. And so if I look at this as a whole and looking at the different arguments that people have given, there are some people that have argued that this is not valid, that it is fair enough um, to sue him for what, or to sue Johnny Depp for what Adam Waldman said. Now, they can certainly sue Adam Waldman for what Adam Waldman said. That's not an issue. Of course they could. But what they're talking about is suing Johnny Depp for what Adam Waldman said. And that's a different thing. If you were talking about them suing Adam Waldman and suing him for defamation, proving that it was defamatory, that should be quite difficult because it's a legal argument. But if they're suing Johnny Depp for what Adam Waldman said, that's a different scenario. And, you know, what does this have to do with Johnny Depp is essentially the question. I mean, did Johnny Depp order him to do it? Well, they can't prove that. There's legal privilege. They'll never be allowed to prove that. They'll never be able to. So there's an assumption there that cannot be proven, and it's very difficult. But Court of Appeals have very high bounds. So based on what I've seen from other people, and some people agree that this was fair on this basis, but most people have disagreed. So I'm putting it at about 70%, 75% chance of being overturned on this basis. Now, the second basis actually acts to sort of be a backup for this first. So if the first one fails, you have a second rung that can also succeed. So you only need one of these three rungs to succeed. And that's the way that they've structured it, and that's the way that the Court of Appeal will look at it. They will say, all right, we'll look at this first one first. And if this first one succeeds, they don't need to look at the other two. Because if this one succeeds, the other two will succeed as well. But if this one fails, the other two can still pass. They can still succeed. And that's the structuring of it is really very clever. And it's done in a way that really maximizes Johnny Depp's chances. Quite unlike Amber Heard's, and I'll get to Amber Heard's perhaps in a separate video. But in this one, so the second one was essentially the claim that, and I'm not sure because I'm a little bit confused with how I follow this, but the second one, the second argument essentially is saying that if you do take into account that, okay, he was doing it on orders from Johnny Depp, the second part is that, well, that's his opinion. In other words, that this is not, it's not defamatory. And so because opinions are never defamatory. The thing I can say, in my opinion, Amber Heard is a liar. And I'm allowed to say that. I can't be sued for that. I've got to say, well, unless, of course, I know she's definitely not a liar. But I can say, well, in my opinion, the fact that she was found guilty of defamation, she's a liar. And I'm also, because she was found guilty, I'm allowed to actually say at this stage, she is a liar. If she was found not guilty and I was calling her a liar, I could potentially be sued. It's a bit tricky, but you see, opinions are different to facts. You can, in theory, still be sued for opinions if it acts like a fact and blah, 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 blah. But essentially, if it's an opinion, it's fine. If it's a fact, it's not. If it's stated as a fact, but it's actually a lie, it could be defamatory. And the thing is, Adam Waldman has no way of knowing for absolute certain that this is true or false. All he has is the evidence which he's basing it on. And based on that evidence, he has a legal argument. And the argument that he presented to the Daily Mail was that legal argument. It was an opinion. And it was stated as an opinion. And in fact, you'd argue that no legal argument should ever be anything other than opinion. I mean, when Elaine Brederhoff went into court and with Amber Heard and said, "Oh, Amber Heard, her pledging versus donating were the same things," can she be sued for that? That's her opinion. She's stating it as a fact, and the fact that we say, "Well, they're not the same thing," doesn't matter. She can't be sued for that. It's a legal argument. When you're making a legal argument, you can't usually be sued for it. I mean, there's a lot of things in these briefs from Johnny Depp's and from Amber Heard's side, which arguably some people would say, well, they're not opinions, but they are. They're legal opinions. And when you have a legal opinion, yes, you state it as a fact, but it's still a legal opinion. So even if it's false, it's not fair to put it as a fact. And the other thing is, and perhaps a separate side of this, Johnny Depp won the case, at least this US version. So therefore, surely this is true. And even if and I suppose you could say, well, but was this part of it true? Well, it wasn't proven that it was definitely a hoax, so much as it was just not true. And there's a difference between saying that something is not true and saying that something was a hoax, because a hoax implies that you were just joking, it was a bit of a stupid thing. So, for example, if we say that, when people go to the crop circles, and of course some people think they were true, but let's say that's a hoax, that's just a little joke somebody played. Well, that's a hoax. But if you said, well, it's not a hoax, it was a lie, that's different. So if you said, for example, oh, the NASCAR lines were a lie, they weren't actually created by aliens, well, you're saying it's a lie, but do you say it's a hoax? No. And there's different things. And so if you say, oh, like the elongated skulls in the Nazca area, they weren't aliens. That's a lie to say they're aliens, but you're not saying it's a hoax. And you see that, so there's a difference. So we could well say that Amber Heard said this was dishonest, but as a hoax, it has a different meaning. But did he know that it wasn't a hoax? Well, that was his legal argument. But was it his legal argument to say that she was lying, or was it to say that she was just joking? And I suppose that's the angle. Because if you sort of go there and you say, well, but he would have known it wasn't just a joke, maybe that's okay. But I still think, generally speaking, and again, this gets to this precedent bit, if you have a legal argument, no matter how stupid that legal argument is, and you are then repeating that in a newspaper, it's still an opinion. Now, again, there is that argument, and the only argument that I can see on this one that could lead to Johnny Depp's team not winning it on appeal is that they use the word hoax. And again, we've looked at people who are commenting on this. The vast majority say this will win. This will be overturned on appeal because it's a legal opinion. And so this is even stronger than the first argument. So you then look at the first argument and say, okay, that's about a 75% chance. You look at this second argument and say, well, it's about a 90% chance. And you combine them. So it doesn't become 90%, it becomes 75% times 90%, which is 97%. Because if the first one succeeds, you don't have to go to the second. But even if the second one fails, the first one fails, you can still win on the second. So 25% chance the first one fails, and only 10% chance that the second one fails. So you got 90% of 25% that one's going to succeed, only 10% of 25%, 2.5% chance. 97.5% chance that one of the first two will succeed. That's how likely it is. And then we get to the third one. The third one is, well, essentially it's saying that they left out important bits. Now, they're not generally allowed to do that in court. So they've redacted bits. Now, there can be an argument to redact bits that are irrelevant. But the argument is that these were not irrelevant because this actually said that, well, actually the newspaper article had the legal arguments of both sides that were clearly listed as opinions. Yes, this is the legal argument, but in context, you know that there were legal arguments on both sides, and they were saying, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. And you also have the commentary from the newspaper that said, well, what do you think? Which opinion do you agree with? Which again supports that second argument that this was an opinion. But redacting that bit, and I think it's important when you do leave context out, it's important to note how important that is. Because if we look, for example, in Amber Heard's video that she made that was sent to TLC about Johnny Depp smashing cupboards. Now, out of context, it looks like, oh, he's smashing cupboards. He just was violent. In context, you got Amber Heard going, oh, look at this, at the start and then at the end. So she goaded him into that position. And it comes into a very different context. And instead of it being her catching him in the act, it's she set him up. And you also, that was the day when Johnny Depp lost $520 million. You got that context that it's quite reasonable to be a bit upset about that. So missing that context was very relevant for that, and it's very relevant for this. So if you redact bits that were important for context, it can really damage the case, and it's really unfair. So I haven't seen anybody who has said that this is a bad argument or that this wouldn't win. I did see somebody say, well, Court of Appeals cases generally don't win, and they still thought that this might not win, but still thought it was likely. So with that in mind, this is stronger than either of the other two. So I'm putting it at about 95%. Now I'm just going to get my calculator out to make sure I've got this right. So if I have 75%, 0.75 times 90%, 0.9. Oh, I've gone the wrong way. Times, no, I've gone the wrong way, haven't I? Times 95, yeah, that ends up 64. But that's the wrong way around, isn't it? So I've really got to say, all right, so 70% I've got 0.25 chance of failure, and then 0.1, and then times, oh, so times 0.1. Oh, got to do this again. So 0.25 times 0.1 times 0.05. So that gives me, so 0.00125 minus 1. So 99.875% chance that Johnny Depp will win his appeal. Yeah. And have that $2 million given back to him. He doesn't have to pay it. And it'll also clear his name a little bit. It's not inconceivable for him to lose, but it's very likely for him to win. Now again, this is just based on what other people have said who are lawyers. It's not based on my legal opinion. It's based on what other people have said and what I've followed and looking at those numbers. So it's extraordinarily likely that Johnny Depp will win his appeal. So over 99%, 99.8725%, I think I had there. It's very likely. And we can't guarantee it. Appeals are hard to win. And perhaps I'll look at what Amber Heard's side found. I haven't been able to find a direct link to what they said. But yeah, this is just very likely. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye.